Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. My name is Michael McKeever, and I will be your host tonight. Let's say hello to our panel. First up, we have arts journalist, critic, and founder of Florida Theater on Stage, Mr. Bill Hirschman. Next to him is the multi-award-winning actress, Karen Stevens. And last but certainly not least is South Florida theater icon, writer, and teacher, Miss Iris Acker. Now, let's say hello to our very special guest, Mr. Marc Durso, who is a director, coach, and the founder of Act True. Marc, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
There you go. Let's start right into it. What is Act True?
I'm an international, nationwide acting coach for television, film, and Broadway. My clients work on Hulu TV, ABC, TLC, CBS. I have a wonderful young lady that just finished her 2-year run in On Your Feet on Broadway. A gentleman who did the restaging of West Side Story on Broadway is Bernardo from Caracas, Venezuela. And the work that I do mostly right now is as a bridge for Latin actors coming from South America through the Miami conduit, our new demographic, and helping them make the move to Los Angeles or New York.
Wow, that's really impressive. Let's talk about your style as a coach.
Okay.
What exactly do you do to get these people to get this success?
Well, I'm an authorized teacher of the Hagen process from HB Studios in New York. Uta Hagen was my master teacher. I had the honor of associate producing and directing her off-Broadway in After All by Vincent Canby, and now I'm authorized by HB Studios to teach this process.
For the audience who may be watching right now, tell us who Uta Hagen is.
How do you do that? We have all day? Uta Hagen, the legendary Broadway actress, master teacher, author, the creator of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf on Broadway, written for her, as the story says, by Everett Albee. That's who he wanted to play it. A legendary actress and a great investigator. Her inquiry into humanity. She wanted to know why humans do what humans do. So she spent her life doing that. There are 2 books, of course, Our Respect for Acting, which everybody reads, but then she reevaluated the way she worked 20 years after that and rewrote that entire process called A Challenge for the Actor. The story is that one day in class, an actor did something, and Miss Hagen corrected her, and the student had the courage to go, Miss Hagen, you say in your book. And she goes, I never said. And she points it to in the book, and she goes, thank you. She got on the phone after class, called the publishers and said, I got to write a new book.
Wow.
And so she, after all those years, she continued to evolve, continued to reevaluate her work, because every actor that walks through that door is a new test for what you think you know, because their humanity is limitless, and it then tests what you think, this codified process of acting in a completely new way. I see the world in a new way. I feel the world in a new way. Do my rules, do my tools still work for that?
I had the pleasure of studying with Uta Hagen. I've been at the Herbert Berghoff Studios. I took a scene study class. Oh, he's gone now. I can't think of his name.
Edward Morehouse?
Say it again?
Edward Morehouse?
No. Other than that, but whoever I could, before I could
Austin
be
Pendleton?
accepted into Uta's class,
Okay.
I tried to take everybody else.
Absolutely.
Not Herbert. Herbert Berghoff, who was her husband and a teacher as well, of course, in his own school. And you have here no gimmicks, no tricks, no attitudes. Did you get that from Uta Hagen?
Not only from Miss Hagen, but from her protege, the legendary Charles Nelson Riley, who the world may know as the wacky guy from Match Game shows and things like that. But he was a heralded, revered, loved, and respected Broadway director, opera director. I mean, he works with people like James Earl Jones and Piper Laurie and all those kinds of people. But he's also an Emmy-nominated television director. So I get the name of my company because one day on his yacht, he said to me, we were watching...
He meaning Charles?
Charles Nelson Riley,
Right.
yes, in Marina Del Rey. We're sitting on, and he cooked dinner for all of his students. We're all crammed into this little galley
Spaghetti.
restaurant.
I've been to many of those.
And
yes.
we were watching Alan Bates in An Englishman Abroad. He said, make sure that every student sees that movie. And in the middle of the show, he just turns to me and takes that big pipe out of his mouth and goes, you must teach. You must teach now. So he always said, since he directed for television, an Emmy-nominated TV director and an opera director and a Broadway director, he would say there's no difference between stage or camera. It's either true or it's not. Now, the technical expression of that is different, but the internal life of it must be the same, or something on either end of that scale is false. The humanity, and that he got from, I shouldn't say he got it from Uta, I think it was honed by Miss Hagen's process. He was her favorite director. I think he directed her 16 times, just when Julie Harris and those kind of people.
I have to say I've had the pleasure of meeting Charles Nelson Riley, and he told hysterical, wonderful stories about Uta
Because he
Hagen.
paid attention.
Yeah.
We would go and have dinner at Sardi's, and we would sit there at a table in the middle of the restaurant, because that's where he had to, that's where they wanted him to be.
Right,
And throughout the meal, I don't know how he ever finished a meal, because everyone would stop by and touch him on the shoulder, and he would go, "How's your mother?" He would know exactly, he would remember them, he would know something about them, because he paid, which is what made him a behavioralist director. He didn't just direct the show. He was paying attention to the humanity moment to moment to moment. So there's the littlest thing could express a truth, not just the lines.
Had the pleasure of interviewing him for our show many times, many years ago. I was up at the Burt Reynolds Theater, where I worked several times, and we actually went on remote up there. And we went into one of his classes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Uta Hagen was his guru, no doubt about it. And we talked about but he never stopped teaching, Charles. What happened after a show, yes, the interns that he let me tag along, we go back to his house, and yes, he would make spaghetti. That's what it was.
I'm going to have like 4 questions along these lines, but we have a lot of people who are civilians that watch this show, or students. When you talk about act true, when you talk about getting to the truth of something, when you talk, they don't know whether you're talking about naturalism or something that could be in a surrealistic play. When you talk about acting true, what is it that you mean for people who aren't actors? What
That's
are
a
you trying
very
to
lovely
explain?
question, because we could do Beckett, we could do Mamet, we could do Miller, we could do Simon, we
Right.
could do Shakespeare, we could do Moliere.
Right.
There's a whole lot of different ways of, and then we could do a Vin Diesel movie, Fast
So-
and Furious 15.
You're reading my mind. So explain to people in English, in non-actor terms, what you're saying.
I'll
What
only
do you
explain
mean?
what I think I know. And if I learned anything from Ms. Hagen, that after 40 years of teaching, she reevaluated her entire process again.
Fair enough.
What's the human thing? What's the human thing? That usually goes down to want. What does that character really would die for? If your work isn't connected to something that is that passionate, it doesn't matter what the external style of it is. If it's, I don't know, Shrek or Rent, Hamilton, or a Shakespeare piece. There has to be a humanity inside of it. It's not, it's a fabulous, rich, facile facade that's rich like material, but what's behind the material? And that's the human experience. We talk about that from what is the character's thoughts. We start with the thoughts. Many styles or techniques talk about what's the emotion, what are you feeling, what's in your heart, what's in your gut. We get there, but we make sure that it's a specific cause, that specific thought. Ms. Hagen calls them the psychological trigger. I call them imagery and action. What is it that is inside of you that is triggering you to do something? As opposed to, am I doing what the director wants? Am I doing something I think the audience will like? This is what I've done in shows before.
And then does the technique come on top of that so that you can repeat that 8 times a week?
Yes, the technique, the Hagen
Good
process.
question.
The 10 exercises, there are 10 exercises in the Hagen process. Physical destination, foresight, changes of self, on and on and on. Each one of them, the first 9, are all investigations of experiences from your real, true life. So we're not getting to the performance, which is so many times you take a workshop, you take other classes, a performance class just for performance is that. But sometimes people teaching acting from doing a show. From our perspective, that's teaching people to perform. And that's a wonderful thing. It gets people gregarious, and they're outward, and they're physical, and they collaborate, but it's not the first thing. That's the next thing.
The basis of your process is behavior based, and we all know that behavior comes from thought, like you said.
Stanislavski, action with thought is behavior.
Exactly. So in psychology too. So what is it about Uta's process, your process, that's similar or different from Stanislavski? I mean, because most acting processes are based in getting at the truth in displaying the truth in behavior and character. So is there a difference, or does Uda's process is a offshoot of Stanislavski, or how do those mesh or don't mesh? Or,
Okay, I got to direct for
Yeah.
Sanford Meisner and his new theater in Los Angeles. At that time, it was new, the Meisner Center. And I was interviewed by his protege, Martin Barter. And, you know, it's all Meisner actors and all his Meisner-trained people. And I'm this Uda guy. I'm this Hagen guy, right? And he's looking at me, and he's wondering, and he's looking at me. And I said, every single one of your graduates is going to work with a director who probably never trained in any technique. If they're, because this is in Hollywood, film directors don't come from acting programs, not in general. They come from a film school. They know how to run a lens, and they know how to frame it. And they know what they're looking for. So I said, you really should have me direct your graduates are Meisner trained, because they're going to run into someone who thinks a different way. If Meisner is about his magic what if, which comes directly from Stanislavski, pure imagination, what if I was in this situation? And Strasberg took his effective memory from Stanislavski's process, his system. Uda looked at all of it, and because I think this is me explaining post-life, I guess, so she's Germanic, you know, she came from Germany, her family came from Germany, she had a very, very hard-working approach towards life. She looked at the facts of things, and the 6 steps of investigation. Who am I, where, when am I, what are my wants, obstacles, actions? Relationships, wants, obstacles, and actions, and there are 6. These things look at the facts of the human experience. What's happening in this space? What's happening in that internal space? What's happening in this external space? What are my wants? What am I fighting? These really get down to the basic facts of behavior. I have something to do. Much work starts about, we're going to sit in the chair. Which is wonderful. It's, you know, Strasberg's relaxation exercise in the chair. It's 45 minutes of getting your body completely open. What a wonderful thing. Miss Hagen would say, maybe I'm paraphrasing, but she would say, if you want to be relaxed, have a task, because it will focus you to do that. And now you're doing that. Now you're doing. And it is what creates. So now you're reactive. You're always reactive. This thing happens, I have to do that. Now that causes that. Now I'm doing that.
Can we
Let's go
talk
to the-
about?
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
I just really want to get this question in. As an actor, one of the things that really annoys me is default gestures while someone is performing, which makes me think that there have been no choices made, and there's no actual connection between thought and behavior. Can you talk about that?
Give an example of what you
Can you talk about, say for instance, an actor is speaking and they're doing this all the time, or they gesture with every word.
Okay. I want to respond to that, because if you open up the first or second chapter of Miss Hagen's book, A Challenge for the Actor, she talks about mannerisms.
Yes, yes, and that's very, very important, integral part of any character is behavior, gesture, mannerisms, all that. Can you talk about how you train your actors? Because whenever I see an actor doing that, it tells me that I believe that there haven't been choices made, or there's no real connection between the objective of the actor that informs their behavior. Can you talk about that?
Yes, you're saying that they're not listening. Now we're
Okay.
back to Meisner.
Okay.
They're not listening. They're already making a choice to fill that empty space. And we do that in real life. We do that at a cocktail party. You got your canopies and this thing, a little plastic glass of bad Chablis in the other hand, and you're trying to talk to somebody, but you're seeing someone over there, and you're trying to get out of the conversation. We make choices that are not reactive to them right now. We're really living in us. And Miss Hagen would say, if you have your task, all of your energy goes there. And so now there's no focus on the self.
Yeah.
Self-consciousness, the very first exercise in the Hagen process, which I can address this question, is called physical destination. And it can be expressed in many different ways, but I always have people fold laundry from a real day in their real life. And you'll see people, like you see some models. I coach a lot of people on South Beach. We have these beautiful, beautiful people. But it's usually guy models, with the hair. And they come in, they're folding laundry like this, they're going. They're looking at you while they're folding. They're completely aware of self, and that becomes the place where they reside. As opposed to, as Charles Nelson Riley would do, it's in the shirt. The life is in the shirt. When your focus goes on the shirt, so does theirs. So does the camera's. But when you're doing this, all the focus goes here because that's what you want. Now, what the actor wants is love. That's what the actor wants. He wants love. He wants attention. He wants all of the information, all of the focus on me. And Miss Hagen would. There's a wonderful thing on YouTube where she gets up and she's explaining something to a student, and she picks up the hanger and she's fixing the pants on the hanger. And you can just there's Uta Hagen. There's Tony Award Uta Hagen right there. And you're not looking at all. You're looking at the pants. And that's where the play is. The play is in the physical. You say gesture, we would say behavior.
Yes.
It is actually in the interaction, the want. I want something from it, I'm going to do something to it, and the whole audience from the balcony to the orchestra is going right there.
Okay, I want to take your class. Let's go into the classroom. What's the difference, first of all, between your classes and workshops? Now, how many students will I find in the class with me?
Well, I'm either very, very proud to say, or it's a statement of the times. I probably have some of the smallest classes of many of my fellow teachers, and I attribute that to the fact that the Uta Hagen process is so challenging. There are 10 exercises. Only the 10th exercise begins with a text. So
That's the class.
That's the class. And the workshops are just 18 hours of that, more deeply over a more intense period of time. But there's the same amount of hours in a workshop as there is in a class. You do a certain number of hours. It can take a year to finish the 10 exercises. It can take 6 months. Depends upon your availability to yourself. How available are you to your truth? Can you trust? It's all about trust. Do I believe what I'm doing right now? Do I believe that they would enjoy that? Do I believe that this is really my phone? And there's that's called endowment in the Uta Hagen process, giving something meaning. And when you come into class, we'll do Spolin improvs called Listen, Argue. It's our primary exercise.
Yeah, again, remember our audience.
Right.
Not necessarily in theater and no terms, so let's.
Okay. And so what we do is we listen and argue. At the exact same time, never stop talking except to breathe. So you have to talk nonstop, yet listen to what the other person is saying and use it back against them. And what you'll see is two people, from kids to adults, two people just talking at you. There's just sound. And as soon as somebody finally listens, you can see the behavior change. You can hear the undulation, the roller coaster of action, reaction, of volume, modulation, all those external things we talk about. It's all internal. You said something that stuck on me, and now I'm back on you, that's back. And now we have interaction, action, reaction, interaction. It comes alive. You're back to Meisner again with his listening, if you'll just listen.
Well, that's basically, I mean, the primary thing when you're acting on stage with someone is listening and responding, right? So,
but so many people make acting choices. They make, I'm going to do this, as opposed to making acting investigations.
Right.
All of this could happen. And what we work with is the Michael Shurtleff process of his opposite actions. It's taught by many, many people. It's a wonderful thing. As soon as you make an acting choice, he would say, it's in his book, he says, actors always come in with their first choice. He says, great, write it down. But its exact opposite is not only possible, it's probably more interesting.
right.
Right.
And when you start working in opposites, your instincts, which you've got to live in your instincts, but they start to widen and they start to deepen, as opposed to, I'm really good at this thing. You start to get good at very many things, because you keep thinking about, okay, my first instinct is that, but the opposite also is possible. Now that becomes your first instinct, and now another opposite comes from that. And now you're just expanding more possibilities. Then when you get in to do the scene, you don't have to make a choice. It's all in there.
But
and it will be spurred by this actor's behavior, this character's behavior, and something will come.
Behavior.
Yes. But you there are a number of choices you can make in a moment. I mean, if you're responding truthfully, you know,
As long as
it's
it's truthful,
almost
make one.
semantics, isn't it? I mean, because if you're responding truthfully.
If you're responding truthfully.
Yeah, in the moment.
But if you're making an acting choice because it looks good or it feels safe.
Yeah, well then that's fake. That's false.
There you go.
Yes, yeah.
Now let's talk about the actor who gets sides for an audition. Doesn't know what happened before, doesn't know what happens after, because the part doesn't call for them to send her the full script. They just want to see her read. You talk about choices. Now, Michael Shurtleff, who teaches how to audition. I always said he taught how to audition for Michael Shurtleff. Michael Shurtleff was a casting director. He was. I mean, that's what he was. And that, but still at all, it was very valuable. And Uda actually taught the same thing about the moment before, not necessarily what happens after, but that moment before. And yes, you do make a choice. You write that moment before.
Yes, you create that.
That's what I'm saying, that was so helpful. Very, very helpful.
I'm curious, though, as someone who has acted but primarily sits in the audience, how technique does or does not fit in when you're doing a long run, when you're doing something over and over again. Two of my favorite stories are Laurence Olivier, who could sit there and recreate the gut-wrenching scream at the end of Oedipus Rex over and over identically every time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when he did Othello, there was the famous performance that was better than any he had ever done, and Maggie Smith said, "You were brilliant," and he was in tears. He says, "I know, I don't know how I did it."
That's a wonderful quote.
So
you want me to talk about Olivier?
No, I want you to talk about I want you to talk about technique, because he was an amazing technician. He was a real master of technique.
Yes, why don't you just act it, dear boy, right?
Right, why don't you?
The classic line.
Got very good. So how does that fit in with what Uga Hagen was teaching? How do those two pieces fit?
Edward Norton has a quotation about doing research and doing research and doing research and doing research. He says, and that's only when you get to be free. When you've done so much, you've filled yourself with so many things. That creates, I can trust myself, I can let anything happen, because I've already investigated. It will feel natural in the moment. Even, I'm playing a character that's nothing like me, but I've done all these things that now become part of me. How do you do a long run? We need to ask the people from Cats, because they did it for 16 years or something like that. Technique, the Hagen 6 steps, would always bring you back to original causes, as opposed to, I get caught up. I'm doing the show tonight, we did two on Wednesday, 2 on Saturday, got a matinee tomorrow, and you just run into it like that. Why does it suddenly become artificial? Why can it become artificial? That's why Miss Hagen started her investigation into her exercises, creating them. Because she was on Broadway. The story is that she was on Broadway, and she was interacting with Eva Le Gallion or somebody, I don't know the story, and she was waiting for the bell curve, the laugh curve, to rise and fall, and she realized, I'm waiting on my audience, which means I'm not really here. So she went and faced that very issue. How do you go into and do something real and alive over and over and over again? You have to stay here. You have to stay in these thoughts. You have to stay in this relationship. She was a big believer in the absolute truth, craft of being able to do a show, but it's got to have heart and soul. I got to act with her in class one day in a scene from Franny and Zoe. And the other actress was having this incredibly challenging monologue. She was having a little challenge, and Miss Hagen said, "Get up, my dear." She came over and sat down, and she's acting with me. Now, Uda Hagen is my sister. And when she said, "Give me the lines," and then she looked back at me, and she locked in on me. It was like lasers. She didn't know the lines. She knew how to give, and she knew how to listen, and she was completely present in that moment. So it's a balance of absolute craft and technique and investigation, and then complete trust and letting go and allowing. It's both.
Do you think it takes a certain amount of courage for an actor to give themselves completely to the moment and go wherever it takes them?
Courage is a really interesting word. We're talking about Afghanistan and Vietnam and those kinds of courages, and mothers that lift cars off their babies because it rolled back over them. I don't know. Art courage is.
Well, it's relative, though, isn't it? Courage.
It takes.
I suspect in that moment it would be.
It takes the strength. It takes the strength. I just always try and balance that art is an expression or a reflection of life, and then there's life. We only get to do our work. We only get to create. We only get to paint. We only get to dance because somebody made coffee this morning and somebody is on the corner selling something and a bodega on 48th and 9th, or something. There's a real thing is out there, and we're the reflectors of it. We're the framers of it. We're the painters of it. We're the sounders of it. So when I hear that word, I agree entirely. Yes, it takes a lot of guts to stand in front of people and do a very generous and selfish act at the same time. I want to give something to you, but I love being an artist. So you got to balance that in there, okay? Does it take courage?
Karen, you've studied with several teachers, have you not?
Yes.
So have I. Don't you find, though, you've taken a little bit from each one?
Of course,
Of
absolutely.
course. But with what Michael is saying.
Marc.
Mark.
I mean, Marc is saying.
That's okay.
I'm very
Michael
big on
Shirley.
Michael.
You were talking about Michael Shirley.
We just had Michael before you.
Yes, we
Michael
did.
and Michael
Yes,
and
we did.
Marc is saying that it's Uta Hagen's method. That's it. You're saying there's right and there's a baby. It seems to me. But it seems to me we're saying there is no other way.
No. Having directed for Sanford Meisner, I certainly know that there are other processes that work. And having met Miss Adler not long before she passed away in Los Angeles at an event, I know there are many other processes. I'm saying, what are each of these processes? If you look at the individual that codified the way they work, it worked for them. Sanford Meisner was an actor. Strasberg was an actor. Uta was an actor. Adler was an actor. And they worked a way of working for themselves. And so actors work with them. Actors go to a process because it fits for them. So there's a million ways of
Yes.
working.
And that's
Thank you for
really
saying
a
that.
really
I feel better
terrific
hearing
way
you
to
say
end
that.
the
Yeah,
show.
ways to do it, okay.
That being said, say I'm a young actor and I would love to take your
You're a
class.
young
How do
actor.
I go about doing it?
You call 954-647-7569. You go to acttrue.com, www.acttrue.com.
Perfect.
And there you go.
Perfect. Marc, thank you so
I
much for
thank
joining
you.
us. And thank you so much for joining us here on Spotlight on the Arts. I want to thank my panel and our very special guest. There's a lot of theater out in South Florida. There are a lot of great things happening every single day. If you want to know where they are and how to find them, go to floridatheateronstage.com, or you can always check in right here on Spotlight on the Arts. Take care, and thanks for joining us.